So I am still on the storyline, kind of going back to Washington, D.C. I'm trying to speed it up to more New York experiences, but there are definitely some highlights in my journey of becoming a plus size model and actress that I think are noteworthy for people and based on some of their questions. One thing I'd like to highlight again is that at the same time, between the ages of 18 and 20, I was in a full 4-year college university. I was discovered, not Instagram famed. This was before the internet. I was discovered at a college fashion show by a producer and a choreographer. And they had introduced me to this concept called plus size modeling. I had never heard of it before. And I'm the type of person who likes to be educated in every aspect, the good, the bad, the pitfalls, the professionalism. So I sought out a school for modeling. I did not spend thousands of dollars. I spent about $100 for a school that I just researched was called Models Unlimited, and it was in the Washington, D.C. area. It was ran by a straight size model who kind of had a Farrah Fawcett look, and the trainer was the top plus size model in Washington, D.C. She kind of had a Delta Burke look. And one of the assistants, or the assistant there, was a young man by the name of Paul Wharton style. Many of you know him also from Fox, Washington, D.C., and I see he's still doing amazing things. From the school, I went from being discovered to being recognized. My talent was recognized while I was in the classes. And the top plus size model who was doing the instruction kind of took me under her wing and started teaching me about how to present myself to agents. There was a strict protocol to present yourself, especially if you were an ethnic model. You didn't wear a lot of makeup. You wore your hair straight, flat back in the bun. At one point, I had to grow the highlights out of my hair. You wore basic neutral colors to model calls that were form-fitting to the body. Because the idea was you are a model selling and marketing a product. That's your job. And the people want to know what their product is going to look like on you. Or at least that's the way it used to be back then. From the agency, I was sent on my first professional show, which was Macy's, and it was an amazing experience. But I was also sent on a show for Bloomingdale's, which they weren't used to seeing plus size models on the runway. So I talked about the agencies. I talked about Macy's. I talked about Bloomingdale's. I believe I've also told you about Liz Claiborne Elizabeth's store. You had to earn your stars and stripes to be a model. So it was almost like being an intern. I was also a dresser. I was sent by the agency to be a dresser for a Liz Claiborne show that had children and straight, which is basically skinny models, and men. And they were looking for a plus size model. So the agency sent me to be a dresser. And you did get paid as a dresser back then. And And you had the same kind of protocol. You still had to wear your hair straight, flat, back in a bun. You had to wear something professional, maybe a little bit more loose fitting, usually dark or neutral colors. And you had to conduct yourself professionally to be considered for any type of modeling. So while I was being a dresser for the Liz Claiborne show, the creative director, I think they were called, or manager, called my agency and wanted me to be part of the Elizabeth store, or the Elizabeth line show. And a lot of that was a lot like the QVCs, where you're kind of standing, and we did seminars on how a woman should wear a scarf or accessorize her clothes. They were really kind of new in deciding what they wanted to do with the plus size market at that time. I think we last left off with a gentleman that I had to mention by the name of Mr. Harvey Starr Washington, who is best known for the Black Congressional Caucus fashion shows. He also, during the time I was modeling with him, had 2 huge plus size shows with the longest runways and the most models I believe I had ever seen. The great thing about working with Mr. Harvey Starr Washington was, once you did a Harvey Starr Washington show, everything else was a piece of cake, because he worked you. I was also on the staff, which again, you're earning your stars and stripes. But I was not part of the casting staff, which I told you a little funny story about that kind of tips on the New York journey. I recently looked up Mr. Harvey Starr Washington, and he is doing amazing shows still in Washington, D.C. At some point towards kind of my senior year, so I had been modeling professionally from freshman year to my senior year in college. And I started to want to do more. And I've decided that I'm going to extend the blogs, the YouTubes, maybe even the Periscope, to a separate section where I talk about television news and television entertainment, because a lot of you have asked me about that. And this is kind of really geared to the plus size modeling and fashion and acting experiences and journey. But I will create a separate blog, YouTube, Periscope about television news and entertainment. When I was a freshman in college, so in my senior year, I wanted to do more print. And this was a time before Photoshop, before filters. So one of the main criteria for being a print plus size model was you had to have clear skin. So I remember going to my agent, and they said, well, actually, the print work comes from other agencies. A lot of the print was coming through another agency. So they had suggested that I go to an agent called Central Casting. Central Casting, which I believe is still in Washington, D.C., was actually the main casting agent for films in D.C. And I walked into their Washington, D.C. office and brought my portfolio, my 4 years of experience as a plus size model. I was ready for some major print campaigns. And the woman looked at me and she said, "You have big pores." Before Photoshop, before airbrushing, and before filters. And she said, "You have to clear up your skin before we can send you out on a print show, on a print campaign." So, devastated. I went and must have tried every skin regimen that you can think of. I went to dermatologists. I didn't stop though. I still was going to auditions. And I remember I ended up at a new kind of ethnic company that was starting to do shows in DC. And the lady said, "You have beautiful skin." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting," because I just went to Central Casting and they told me I had to work on my skin. And they said, "No, you probably just need to drink more water." One of the keys that I think I spoke about before is that sometimes you can try every skin regimen in the world, but if you don't monitor what you're actually putting in your mouth, your skin is never going to clear up and look healthy. So that is part of the skin regimen journey that I learned from that experience on. And of course, I was just graduating from college, and we all know what we eat when we go to college. So Central Casting actually begins the first professional casting agent I went to in my adulthood. But I actually went there for print campaigns. The funny story, which kind of taps into the series that I will do in reference to television news and entertainment. At 18, I was an intern for WRC NBC News 4 in Washington, D.C. And I was started in the sports department with the George Michael Sports Machine. And, as an intern, they always set aside work for interns to do. So they had work for me for the entire summer, the 3 months that I would be there. Within about 3 weeks, I had completed all of the work that they wanted the intern to do. So I had brought in my tapes that I had created in broadcasting from junior high and high school and presented them to George Michael and a news director in the newsroom. And I remember George coming out and saying, "I can't believe this. Oh my God. So much talent, but they're instructing you the wrong way." The funny part was he thought they were tapes from college. They were actually tapes from junior high and high school, which I had later explained. I didn't want to give GW a bad rap. But he actually was one of the people that took me under their wing to show me how the news, and particularly sports news and sports entertainment, was done. The news director came back with the tape. And I'll never forget the expression on his face. It was an expression of surprise. And he looked at me and took me into his office. And he said, "You're an actress. You might be a journalist, but you're definitely an actress." He continued to say, you could spend 10 years trying to be, at the time, the main news anchor was a wonderful woman by the name of Doreen Gensler. Or you could spend 5 years to become Shelley Long or Diane Carroll. And honestly, at 18, names like Shelley Long and Diane Carroll weren't on the tip of my tongue, so I had to go look them up. I chuckled and I told him that I was going to school for journalism and broadcasting, and it's something that I wanted to do since I was 12 years old, and that I don't think my parents would have favored a concentration of my college in acting. He said, I'll talk to your parents. You need to take some classes in acting. So I did. And he did talk to my parents. Ironically, while I was at school, there was a multicultural advisor that came to me that same summer, and I started to wonder if the news director actually called the school. And he said, why didn't you apply for the acting scholarship at the George Washington University, or any acting scholarship? And I had actually graduated a year early, so it was a rush to go to college and prepare everything you needed for college by the time I made the decision to go. Therefore, I went to a college upon which I did not receive the scholarships because I did not make it in time to apply for them. And that's what I had explained to him. And then I think he went back and looked it up and realized that it was a scholarship that you had to apply for while you were in high school. Mind you, this was before the internet. We did not have access readily available. You had to do a lot of research. You had to go to the library. You had to build relationships to get information. It wasn't at the click of a button. And then you had to figure out how to apply for things. So, another amazing, funny story in my journey that I guess you would say begins plus size acting or just simply acting. I did take classes. I became a minor in theater and dance. And I remember one professor kind of studying the way I was doing scenes because he wanted to make sure we were reading our books, Acting 101 and Stanislavski and method acting and all the proper things that go into becoming an actor or actress. So he decided he was going to give me 2 challenges. The first was because I was pretty mature most of my life. He decided he wanted to see if I could act like a 14-year-old. And I did. For the actual test at the end of that class, I remember him saying, I'm going to give you a big challenge. I want you to do a rape scene. Okay, this is going to be a big challenge. And we were able to pick partners, and the partners were able to pick each other. So I guess I ended up with the partner I wanted to pick. And things you don't know, when you're really studying acting, you have to develop intimate situations for certain characters. And this requires physical activities, exercises. We were actually trained on how to give each other, it's not so much a massage, but it's like almost like a yoga style, getting in tune to each other's movements and spirits, so to speak. I forget what it was actually called, but it was pretty intense. And we got ready to do our test, and I did the scene. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know what to write. He was trying to decide what method of acting I was using and how that method of acting was interacting with my partner, my acting partner. And he ended up saying, whatever works. He couldn't put a label on it. The second funny story, which many of you are fans of, it's a little show called Scandal. The lead actress is a woman named Kerry Washington. Kerry, I can't remember, I think Kerry is probably, we're probably about the same age. Because I graduated early, I always get confused on who's older, who's younger. But at the time I met Kerry, I was considered the upperclassman. And we were in Leslie Jacobson's class at GW. And one of the assignments was to do poetry. And again, I was very known for doing poetry both in high school, junior high, and college. And we did a first round of everyone doing the poetry, and then she put us in partners. We didn't choose our partners. She placed us in partners. So she decided to place me with a little underclassman named Kerry Washington. Beautiful person, darling, sweetheart. And she did Langston Hughes very appropriately. I remember the acting teacher kind of watching both of us, and she pulls me in and she says, Erica, I want you to work with Kerry to bring something out in her. And it kind of went a little something like this. Well, son, I tells you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards all torn up with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all's the while I've been a-climbing and landing and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on them steps, 'cause you find it kind of hard. Don't you fall now. I'm still going, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Mother to son, Langston Hughes. So there you have it. I remember the last time in college I had seen Kerry was at the graduation party that they had at the Union Station, train station. And it was funny because I was like, "What are you doing here? You're the underclassmen." She kind of pointed to the gentleman she was with. She was a beautiful person. She is a beautiful person. Kerry Washington, Miss Kerry Washington, the George Washington University Theater Program. So that was the beginning, well, in my adulthood, of training for acting. And the first acting agent I went to was Central Casting, which I went to for print modeling. And somewhere along holidays of going back home to the Cherry Hill area, I picked up the Yellow Pages and started looking for opportunities in modeling in New Jersey and New York. And I ran across another agent who brought me in for plus size modeling, but really promoted me for acting. In particular, there seemed to be a lot of industrials. Industrials are like the videos you would see if you were waiting at the hospital. Basically commercial work at that time. And she was referring me to the top agent or agency in the area, which was a company called Mike Lemon Casting, I guess, at the time or later on, best known for casting the movie Philadelphia, Rocky movies, amongst others. By the time, and I'm skipping around a little bit, I got to New York, I finally get my dream job in television, or so I thought, at a major news network, which I'll talk about in another tape. And I start getting all these calls to come on talk shows. I don't want to break a third and fourth wall in television production, but I think we can talk about the third wall. A lot of people know about the third wall. A lot of people know about the fourth wall these days because of the internet. So I would get calls for the Maury Povich show, the Montel Williams show. And I remember one time a casting agent called and they said, "We have this great show for you to be on. It's a dating show. So we want you to fill out this application and tell us your perfect date. And then we're going to interview you." So I filled out the application, sent it in to the producer. And at the time, news started to really pick up. We were in the middle of the death of Princess Diana, which was 45 weeks of the same news over and over and over again, regurgitated in 15-minute increments. And we were working 16-hour, sometimes 24-hour days. So when I started to get these opportunities, I had to make a decision. whether I was going to go on auditions, actually go to these shows, or work in the industry that since I was 12, I had dreamed of being in. And more times, often, I chose to work in the industry of television news that I had worked on since childhood. Not sure if that was the best choice, but it was a choice. So the lady calls back and she says, well, are you coming for the show? And she said, wait a minute. I'm looking at your background here. I'm looking at your card and your background. So she realized that I worked in television production. So she says, well, I'm going to be honest with you. We're asking you what you like on a date so that we can give you the complete opposite to make it a great show. And at that time in my life, I was like, that's okay. I think I'll go back to work. But that was the beginning of, I guess you would say, how plus size models or plus size actresses were being utilized on television. We were considered everyday people that could be implemented into talk shows. Eventually, I ended up with 5 acting agents. One of the advice that I give now, I mean, being an agent takes on a whole new meaning these days, but never sign an exclusive contract unless the person or agency is going to have you working every single day with major livable wages. Or they just have accounts no one else can get. I mean, having 5 agents, major agents in New York City, was the way to go at that time. And again, I went to the agents, started off for plus size modeling, and ended up being called for print work, and ended up being called for acting. But I'm not going to talk about all of New York just yet. It did end up leading to a SAG waiver on the set for Stepford Wives. What is a SAG waiver? Well, when you get a speaking role and the director films you, whether it airs or not, you are then given the opportunity to be, I think it's 2 more speaking parts, to be part of SAG, a union actor or actress. And I was on the path, right out the box. First movie, major Paramount movie set. I was pulled to do a scene for the movie Stepford Wives. They had me with a Nicole Kidman lookalike, and we were playing powerful businesswomen from the 1980s. And the director, I think the director's name was Oz. To look it up. Very well-known director. And the big movie set where they roll while you're walking and talking. And for some reason that day, I could not walk a straight line. Me, the model, could not walk a straight line. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to start the scene of your feet pan up to you speaking and going into this acting scene. So the movie comes out, and so excited. I mean, I have a SAG waiver. I am a bona fide actress. And they did the movie scene, kept watching, and for some reason that entire like 1980s powerful woman's scene was cut from the movie. We were also in the freezing cold for the scenes. All that glitters is not gold. We were supposed to pretend it's springtime when it was actually February, and they were hoping it wasn't going to snow. But it was a lot of fun, and probably the ultimate achievement of my journey in becoming a actress, a SAG waivered actress. Wasn't thinking about that when I was a kid. So, what kind of advice can I give you from these experiences? The first is when people discover something unique about you, whether it's a talent or something you keep hearing over and over again, take stock in it. Take inventory and invest in yourself. If someone tells you that you sing well, take some lessons in singing. If someone says you're a great writer, try writing a book. Maybe someone simply says, you're really good at solving people's problems. Maybe that's your calling to be a psychiatrist. Take note of the things that people discover within yourself that maybe you don't always see. The second is when you become recognized. Be thankful. Be humble. And kind of let the moment guide you from discovered to recognized. And more importantly, make sure you educate yourself in anything that you strive to do, because eventually it will lead you into new directions of discovery and being recognized.